Welcome to Theater for Ideas. Imagine this, good teachers fired for no reason. And unfortunately, my two guests are the two good teachers. Not that they were good teachers, but that they were fired for no reason. Today's show is simply to give them a chance to tell their side of the story. We're going to be talking about charter schools you've probably heard a lot about, and maybe they aren't all that they're cracked up to be. Bruce Greening was the principal at Imagine Master Academy here in Fort Wayne on Wells Street until a month ago. Jennifer Murray was Dean of Students until a month ago at the same school. Jennifer is an old friend, not old in the sense of age, but in terms of how long I've known her, and she's helped me a lot over the years, and I know she's a person of integrity. And when I found out about this, I said, I've got to do a show if you want to do it and give you your chance to tell your story. So we're just going to begin with Bruce. Why don't you kind of run us through what happened back in November, about a month ago, a little over a month ago. You had a job. One day you went into work. Is this right? And you
Yes.
didn't have a job?
Precisely, Terry. The school was running well. Our NWEA scores were up from last year. I put in place some strategies to address some of the deficits in the ISTEP preparation. We had parents involved. Unlike the previous inaugural year, we had just come out of a very successful week of preparing for events at the school. And then I was called in by Guy Platter, who's the regional director, and Jason Bryan, who's the vice president, national director, and was told that was my last day and that I was terminated. I asked why, and he didn't give me a viable reason. He was dancing around, and I said, okay, thank you, and then I left. I didn't realize some of the things in the background. I transferred out here from Washington, D.C. to take this position for personal reasons as well, family, emergency, and didn't do a lot of investigating before. I'd known of Imagine in the East. They have several schools in Maryland. I had visited, and it is an ideal. I really did believe up to November that charter schools can really make the difference for students of our demographics here in Fort Wayne. I'm convinced now, after some further investigation, that the charter school movement, particularly Imagine schools incorporate, is not about education. Very little to do about education with educating children, but more so on the corporate socialist level of, making money.
Well, I think you've said it, and you said before we went on the air that education isn't really about students anymore, if it ever was. What happened? Did the same thing happen to you the same day, Jennifer? And then we'll get into some of the points Bruce made.
That was on a Thursday. Shortly after they let Bruce go, Guy then called me in. I went in, sat down, and was he and Jason, and he told me that today was Bruce's last day and that they were going to be doing some changing and they were going to pull me as dean, but that he would offer me a teaching position. I asked him, well, what teaching position and where? Well, he didn't know. He didn't know. He couldn't tell me that. But that he would give me the evening to consider it, think about it. And he couldn't give Bruce any reason. He really didn't give me any either. I asked what his rationale was for changing things around, for dismissing Bruce. He couldn't tell me. So I did take the evening, and then Friday I came in. Didn't hear from him, but I sent him an email, and I told him that upon thinking about it, talking to some friends, I decided I'd stay on, take a teaching position. He sent me a little one-sentence email, said, well, we'll discuss this after school. And then after school, he called me back to Building 2. And I went up there, and he pretty much said, well, we've decided you're not a good fit. So today was your last day.
Well, I know that you created really a Halloween program with one of the buildings, you call it haunted house, put a tremendous amount of effort. I saw things in the paper that said under your leadership, I-STEP scores went up, and one parent called you awesome as a teacher, and this is the way that you're treated. No reason, again, I want to emphasize, there is no reason given. To this day, no reason given. Let me just read a line from the mission statement of Imagine Schools. We also need to point out the Imagine School on Broadway is one of, or excuse me, on Wells Street is one of two, I believe, in Fort Wayne, the other one on Broadway. And it's part of a national chain, Imagine, and Imagine in turn is part of a national movement toward charter schools, which I have a lot of problems with, and Bruce alluded to in the opening under the guise of reform. I say beware of lofty ideals because a hidden agenda is lurked behind them. And Imagine's mission statement says you want to maintain a caring, learning environment of affirmation. Now, how is what they did to you? See, they don't even live up to what they say they will do, with no responsibility, no accountability, and further develop the intellect and character of the students. This shows a lot of character to fire people, professionals.
Right.
I mean, you had to go to college, get master's degrees, possibly more, and no reason. Now, before we go on, we need to point out that one of the reasons given for charter schools is, oh, there's so much bureaucracy in public schools, there's so many rules, they bog down the learning process, so we're going to have a school where you don't have to do that. Well, part of that is we don't have to give any reason for firing people. We don't have to give any reason for kicking a kid out of the school like public schools do. They have problems, but they at least have some accountability. School boards are publicly elected. And in charter schools, they are not. They are appointed, and yet charter schools get tax money just as public schools do. And end this with, at the top, they are for profit. They are part of the corporate world that rules. The United States of America rules the government, and you alluded to the cultural, socioeconomic. So anyway, I just want to get that straight for viewers.
Another thing, now that you say that, there is a lot of hesitancy from them to have written policy. And that was really kind of made aware to me this summer as we were trying to put the middle school together and decide on a policy. They don't want a written policy because a written policy, they feel like a written policy puts limits.
The more vague, the better.
Right.
Because then you can't really go in and say, here it is in writing.
But that's a contradictory to state laws and federal laws in that charter schools are held to a higher level of accountability, both in personnel, financial, and academic achievement. Here we have something that is on paper, but then quite different in practice. Neither Jennifer nor I had a contract, a job description, an offer letter, no guidelines that describe what our duties were. And so based upon that, because maybe the reason is so wild, I've got my own theories I'd like to share, that they would not want to get themselves in any legal trouble. But the reason was never given.
And I think that's just disgraceful. I mean, no matter what your philosophy, the word for that is contempt. They're showing contempt for you. If they're going to treat teachers with a proven record of achievement, proven record of caring for students, which after all should be the only purpose of a school. The only purpose is to take young people and teach them.
And I've made that statement several times in front of parents and teachers. Our only purpose of being there at Imagine is for the education of each child that comes into that building. I came across something, if I could share, that kind of alludes to a reason for me. I was reading an article, or an article was sent to me from a reporter in Nevada. There was a school there that the principal was recently fired, around the same time I was fired. His name is Hugh Williams. And as the paper read, if I can, the paper said that he was asking too many questions about the budget. He was asking about the 12% fee that was going to the corporation on the total of their revenue. And it dawned on me, because prior to my termination, I had planned the upcoming Monday. I was terminated on Thursday. I'd already made it public. Parents were being invited to a regular PAC meeting, which is our Parent Association meeting. I had prepared teachers for that meeting as well. It was the first time that teachers and parents were going to come together and discuss several things. The main item on that agenda for the night was the school budget. Now, I had asked for, I gotten Guy's permission, I've gotten the business manager's permission, and I said, this is what I'm going to do Monday. Please send me a copy of the finalized budget that was approved by the board weeks earlier. And I was asking too many questions. I was going to become what they kind of hallmark. Their whole philosophy is that they are very transparent. Parents have a voice. Parents and students equate to their economy. It equates to their dollars. I think they get something like $6,400 per student. And so parents should know what's going on with the funds that are being given to them. They're taxpayers as well.
Absolutely.
And so I was just doing what philosophically Imagine was all about, being transparent. And I wrote this article, a letter to Guy, if I could read just some of it.
Sure.
The following article reminded me of another occurrence regarding Imagine Master Academy. And that article I embedded in the letter was about the Nevada school. Earlier this year, I was given the task of preparing the 2008-2009 IMA school budget. After several revisions and consultation with staff and other concerned persons, I presented the budget to you and Amy Williams, our business manager. It wasn't balanced. We were about $200,000 in the red. A week or so transpired when Amy and I were called to your office. You presented us a balanced budget with about $38,000 in the black. The explanation you gave us is that you had applied for a state implementation grant of $250,000. My memory is a little fuzzy, and I asked him for clarification, and he kind of danced around it, exactly how we were going to be using that, and I don't want to accuse anyone of any impropriety. I just felt that it needed to be investigated. I said it needs to be investigated. If true, possible state and federal laws have been violated, and of course their own philosophical base, the 6 pillars of economic sustainability, shared values, and integrity. So there was a question I had raised. I was presenting the budget, and I was going to be completely transparent with parents of what money was coming in and what money was going out. And I believe that really is the basis, although they won't admit it, of my termination.
Right. I mean, it does seem there's a link. I mean, it was like Thursday that you got the bad news, and then Monday was this budget, this meeting to present the budget. Yeah, I think you found the answer. Now, at the time, your dismissals, your firings, sparked a lot of controversy in the school. We opened with a picture of a lady holding up a sign. I believe the sign petitions, charters, firings sparked controversy from the parents. Jennifer, you have a copy of that petition. Could you read part of it? Do you have it there? One of the parents wrote that, and then Bruce delivered that, probably at your own expense, to Virginia. Virginia being the national headquarters of Imagine.
I went to Virginia, but the Bakis, Dennis and Eileen Baki, who are the CEOs of the Imagine Schools Corporation, refused to meet with me. Through their lawyer, Hayes is his name, they said any communications to the Bakis will go directly to them. And by the way, I've been since blocked out of their emails, so they can't even receive any emails from me as well.
Would you like me to read just the petition then, or?
Yeah, start with the petition.
The parents of Imagine Master Academy on Wells in Fort Wayne, Indiana request to be heard by the Board of Directors of Imagine Schools Incorporated. We, the parents at Imagine, believe that charter schools are of vital importance to us and our children. We believe that the best gift that we can give our children is the gift of a positive, productive education. To those ends, we demand the following of Imagine Master Academy. Number one, due to a high turnover rate in teachers and administrators, we believe that teachers deserve to have safeguards in place to prevent them from being terminated without just cause and warning. Although contracts are not necessary, teachers should have the same protection offered employees of other at-will companies, in that a certain number of verbal and written warnings are given, as well as performance reviews. According to the charter with Ball State, the school, Imagine, will include in the employment contract thorough, consistent, and even-handed termination provisions that include appropriate due process. Number two, we also believe that Bruce Greening and Jennifer Murray be allowed to resume their roles of principal, school director, and dean of the middle school, respectively, in light of the fact that these two educators were not given proper reviews or even a clear-cut objective as far as the regional director's vision of the school. We believe that these two wonderful educators were unjustly terminated. And number three, finally, in light of the facts that have surfaced surrounding the termination of the two educators, we would ask that Guy Platter be replaced as the regional director for this region. Other directors are involved with the schools but take a hands-off approach when it comes to dealing with the day-to-day operation of the school. Mr. Platter's continuous micromanaging of teachers and administration at Imagine, fueled by his own paranoia, has resulted in the termination of two educators that had the school marching in the right direction. In addition, he's hurt morale with teachers, staff, and parents with his reckless actions.
So how can that be good for the school? How can that be good for the learning environment of young people? It can't. And what message is it sending to a sixth grader to see that one day their teachers are there, you're interacting with them, they're comfortable, they're learning. The next day you're not there, and probably no reason given.
And
You're
we
just
both
not
had,
there.
Jennifer and I both had very good relationships and good working relationships with our parent volunteer group, with our students. Jennifer was developing a very good rapport with the middle school students, and as you can imagine, middle school is a difficult age. But Jennifer had a handle on the discipline and the academic runway there. Also, she pulled together a great team, and they were continuously evaluating and reevaluating the curriculum. So she had was doing a very good job in the middle school.
What ages went to Imagine on Wells Street? Was it just middle school, or was
No, it's K through 7
K
this
through
year.
7? And what about Broadway? Is that
K
the
through
same?
5.
K through 5. Do they have plans to go to high school?
Not at Broadway.
Or not eventually, do you think? Or do
At
some
Wells
Imagine
Street.
schools include high
They
school?
plan, as I understand it, they plan to feed in to the campus there on Wells Street. Is that how? Is that? And then, eventually, the Bridge Academy will offer high school, as well as Wells Street.
And those plans are still on the table, but the intent was for the Wells Street campus to be that K through 12.
Okay.
Right.
Well, that petition was written by a parent,
Yes.
correct? So parents felt strongly at the time, but do you feel like they're starting to lose interest in supporting
Well,
you?
I think that parents want their children to be in a safe place, and they want their children to have the best education possible. And as long as they feel they're getting that, they're gonna be happy. And they want that. That's what they want. So they want to see that happening, whether it is or not. That's what they want to
Well,
see.
and that's understandable, but it seems there should be a big red flag waving about the way you were treated in the future progress of their children.
Well, particularly when their own philosophy is, part of it is the involvement of all the stakeholders, having a say in every aspect of the school. That's what I was introduced to when I went to this principal's boot camp in Virginia. All new principals had to attend this week-long workshop. And they talked about transparency. They uplifted the 6 pillars and the
The 6
basis of it.
pillars. What are the 6 pillars?
The 6 pillars
If
are
you
the
can
6 aspects by
reset
which
couple
all
of them.
schools are evaluated. Imagine schools are evaluated. Shared values, economic sustainability, academic achievement, parent involvement,
Parent choice, character education.
character education, and new school development. And by those, we were evaluated several times, a couple of times a year, excuse me, only a couple of times. But
The school is evaluated.
my concern is that you hold up these lofty principles, but at the same time you're unfair. You're unfair
Yes.
in your practice, and not only in this school here in Imagine, but I mean in Fort Wayne, but also in Nevada, in Texas, in Missouri, in Florida. The integrity of the corporation is under scrutiny now because of unfair practices going on in these major cities. So what happened here, it seems to be sort of commonplace in Imagine schools. And when we petition, we write, we email, we visit their office in Virginia, and everyone gets the same response: no response. They
Okay.
refuse to even, acknowledge.
No
letters.
returned phone
And
calls,
that
no returned emails.
that is so disturbing. I mean, nothing disturbs me more, and this is a smaller scale than what you're experiencing, but to email or leave a
Yeah.
message for somebody
Yeah.
and you never hear back. And all they have
Right.
to do is hit reply.
Right.
They don't even have to go on the phone. They don't have to face you. They can just say, "Dear Mr. Green, thank you for your interest," or whatever.
You know, I was shocked. I mean, I was surprised. I really thought, from everything that we'd heard from the Bakis, they were just really vested in this, and this was important to them. So I was really surprised to not hear back from them at all. Then as this went on, and as I read more, I realized, well, of course they're not going to respond to this. They're busy setting up 15 schools in Florida. And, I mean, the corporation is huge, and they're setting schools up all over the nation. And we're just a, campus in
But
Fort Wayne.
that's no excuse. They have staff. They have people. They pay. I mean, they.
But my
and
point
to
is,
take a
this wasn't
minute-
important to them.
I
This
know,
is not
obviously
important
it was
to them.
not important to them.
But just remember, a few weeks prior to that, the Bakis were here in Fort Wayne. They visited our campus, and we gave them a tour. We explained our discipline program, the curriculum for the middle school. And I explained part of the vision that I was working on. And they sent a note back congratulating me and the staff for a job well done. And
Just
a
a
few weeks
couple
later,
weeks?
right, and a few weeks later, we were terminated. At that time, and the time we spent a week with them in Virginia on the Principals Boot Camp, at the National Workshop in St. Louis this summer, also in Columbus, where we had a regional Principals Workshop. The message I was getting from the Bakis is that they were personable people. They were very concerned with every aspect of all of their 670 or 73 schools, and that they had a hands-on. And this was a turnaround. How at the one time turn, you're saying one thing, but actually meaning another. I was sold. In other words, I was sold a bill of goods about Imagine Master Academy. It's just another a corporate conglomerate under the guise of national public educational reform, but yet they're really just out to make money. They are, and they have their figures are out in some of the public documents. The worth is about $200 million, and so $200 million. So this 4.5 million here in Fort Wayne, they have bigger fish to fry, I guess.
Well, The Nation has an article, I think, in the current issue called "Beware School Reformers," just making the point that you just made. And Americans should realize, under the guise of reform, this is more corporate rule, and this is already a country under the thumb of corporations. It is the single biggest problem in this country. They own the politicians who make the decisions and make the laws. They fund these politicians, whether it's the media, the oil industry, the drug companies. You can list them all, the big corporations, and they've got politicians in their pocket.
Absolutely.
And the new president-to-be has appointed a man who is a big charter school guy, as I understand it, who doesn't look good. And this article said, imagine, it was interesting, he ended with the word imagine. Imagine somebody who cares about education in charge of the education department. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said, which gets back to your point. Schools have only one purpose, kids, and all this other stuff is secondary. And I want to get to a point you made in one of the 6 pillars that stood out to me: parental involvement. I believe the man who wrote the petition had a letter. Maybe you could find that paragraph about parental involvement, what he said. And my point is, I remember, I believe it was in the Journal-Gazette, they quoted Mr. Platter as saying, you know, parents had said, we want to know. And he said, and again I'm paraphrasing, I probably have the exact quote, maybe you can find it in there and we can just read it.
That was
toward the bottom.
Right, about parents, the only choice they have is to enroll their student.
Yeah, go ahead, let's just put it in his words.
Platter said it's important that he listen to parents' advice and be responsive to them for the overall program, but the company also has the right to run its own business, he said. We're just not going to sit down with the parents and have them dictate how it is internally we run our organization, Platter said. It would be similar to any business feeling like they have to get an okay from their clients for every particular aspect internally for how they run their business.
Oh, but there's a big difference, Mr. Platter. Those clients are not paying you possibly against their will out of their taxes, as I'm helping to pay his salary. I'm helping to pay, or at least for the students who go there. So I have a stake in this, and it's I don't like it. You know, I don't like a administrator saying parents have no business running a school. If it's their kids and the school's for kids, who else has a business in putting involvement in the school but parents? He's saying, you let us teach the kids. That's ridiculous.
And stay out of it. He's not the only administrator that said that. The present Jim Huth, the present principal, said that at a parent meeting shortly after our termination. And he said to the parents that the parents had no voice. That the only choice parents had was to enroll the child or to remove the child.
Now, wait,
Here we go.
Wait. This was where? At Imagine or at a public school?
At Imagine at a meeting with parents.
Enroll them or not? Okay, go ahead.
According to Jim Huth, our new principal, the only voice that parents have is whether or not to enroll their children at Imagine. Other than that, parents have no say in what goes on at Imagine.
And apparently Jim Huth did not read the national website. Under parent choice, it states very clearly, Imagine, where every voice is heard. So Jim must have missed that part.
This is highly annoying. I mean, really, it really is. And you know, it gets back to the American public. They need to wake up. That's all there is to it. We're losing our country with this kind of stuff. I mean, it's not, I mean, what happened to you, of course, is very, very upsetting. And it's upsetting to me, and it should be upsetting to anybody. But in the bigger scheme of things, it tells us, it's painting a picture of a corporate ruled country that has no interest in the little people, the people
Absolutely.
beneath them.
Public schools have always been the bedrock of this country. Every possible leader, every possible field, whether it's medicine, religion, science, that depended on the education. And somewhere along the line, someone taught them. Somewhere along the line, they were taught by a good a teacher who was concerned about them, led them and guided them. We're missing the point here. What's missing in education is that kind of a teacher who cares and is willing to take the extra time. Put in the hands of corporate America, we'll lose it completely.
Completely. Speaking my experience, you know, I got a lawyer who defended me for free. He was from IU. He was a law professor. But he said, and I was a public school teacher, so they had to go through the appearance of a hearing. Of course, as the school board made the charges, the school board decided on the charges. That's the kind of hearing you get in public schools. But nonetheless, they had to drag out charges. And I remember he said in that hearing, because he's a labor lawyer, he said, you couldn't fire a window washer on these charges. And he said, all I hear from his students is he was an exceptional teacher. And here you want to fire him. So it just, public schools have a problem because they serve the state. So then Imagine takes that kind of weakness and says, oh, we need reform. We need a school that, oh, we're going to really let these kids flower and blossom and, you know, have their own opinions. The last thing they want is independent thought, because
Right.
it leads to people like you.
Absolutely.
Well, what else would you like to say? I remember you had said you were upset because this new principal who came from Columbia City High School, your replacement, had said some things about you that you didn't think were true. It starts to altered reality is what the point I'm getting. That's another corporate ploy. They just make things up.
Yeah. You know, the parents initially demanded a reason. They wanted a reason. How can you just let two people go without any reason at all? And I think maybe the pressure finally got to them where they felt like in order to quiet the parents, maybe they had to give a reason. The reason that I heard he was giving them was that during the developing of the middle school, while we were putting the middle school together, he had reached out to me several times to offer advice, and that I had neglected to reciprocate, which is ridiculous. It was a lie. The one time that I actually sought his advice, I sent him an email and wanted to talk to him about a policy that we were putting together for academic probation, and I never heard back from him. He didn't respond. I went to see him out at Broadway at one point, and he didn't mention it then either. So not only did he not respond to me whenever I asked him for advice, but he never offered me advice, and now he's telling the parents that that's why I was released, because when he had offered me advice, I neglected to take it.
And you see, you two have integrity. You wouldn't do that. And how somebody that has principles is a threat. See, this is a sickness in American society. People that stand for something good, conviction, compassion, caring about students, a proven record of improving students' lives, get fired or punished for what should be moral qualities that we should be applauding. This is the real nasty part of this story.
And the contradiction is that this is what they're supposed to be standing for.
Exactly.
Themselves. Character development is one of the other 6 pillars, and based upon their shared values, integrity, justice, and the other is fun, which is another part of that. But that's what they publicize, that they stand for. And this is the basis of which they're going to build their education, both academic and non-academic. And from that, we're going to grow these kids that are free thinkers and are able to make an impact on society. And at the same time, it contradicts itself, because when we discover budgets, we discover expenditures, there's more money spent on overhead than actual instructional pieces. There's more money spent on the purchase of land and buildings and the maintenance of those buildings than the actual moving forward of student success.
Didn't you say they didn't even have textbooks, or hardly had any textbooks at Imagine?
They don't use a lot of textbooks. Math is the only subject in which they have textbooks.
There's a book by a New York teacher who was New York Teacher of the Year. I think it's called The Underground History of American Education. But one of the points he made, and I was thinking of this when you said back at some point in our history, school stood for something. The old one-room schoolhouse, you know, had better results. I mean, it gets back to another peeve of mine, and this is compulsory education in a land that just brags about its freedom. Now, I don't know what the answer is, but he also has a book called Dumbing Us Down, Compulsory Education, which I haven't read. But in the old days, when the country was founded, for about the first 100 years, and I don't always get facts exactly right, so if I get a letter saying I'm moronic, okay, so be it. But roughly 100 years, there was no compulsory education, and literacy rates were higher. Now, I know you can take in a lot of factors, a different kind of lifestyle and all that, but what the debate should be isn't public school or charter school. It should be what makes the best learning environment for young people to learn, whether it's your own house, whether it's a one-room schoolhouse, whether it's a charter school, a public school. Maybe for some it's one, for others it's another. But we're losing sight of the true purpose of schools, which has to be learning. And in American schools, and I've told Jennifer this, I believe the primary value taught is obedience. You know, and that, like you two, I would say you disobey. That has a strong connotation, but you're not yes people in the sense that if you see something that bothers you, you'll respectfully bring it up to Guy Platter or to a parent or whoever it is that you have the question for.
Yeah. The last time I asked Guy Platter a question, he put me on silent treatment for 2 weeks.
I see, that's what I mean. And what is Guy Platter's glowing credentials to be a school administrator? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I know he was a librarian.
Yeah. When I was fired, I wasn't given a reason either, and the students protested, and and one of the charges in that school board hearing was I was charged with inciting a riot, which was after the fact. All they wanted is what we're here today.
Right.
Those kids were just saying, we like him, he's a good teacher, he's good to us. What did he do? Tell us, tell us. Of course, silence, just like you're getting. So they just said, okay, we're not going to school. We're just going to sit around. It was a Christmas time, this time of the year. They sat around a big tree and sang Christmas carols. The school called the police. The state police came, said, hey, these kids aren't disobeying. They're just sitting here. They're peaceful. This is your problem. So they left. But again, it's this silence, which is a kind of contempt. And especially when you have made these lofty statements about integrity and character and parental involvement, and then the exact opposite happens, and you can't even say, well, I know I said that, so we feel this is a little different circumstance. Something, instead of just pretending like, well, we never even said it, doesn't even exist. It's not even out there. Don't bother us with it.
There's a thought in Dennis Baki's book, The Joy at Work, and he actually answered a question that he posed: at what point do you fire an employee? And the example he used was that if a CEO of a company lost $1 million that year, that's not a reason to fire them. That is not a reason to fire them.
No, they'll get a bonus for that.
And then he went further to say that, now, if that CEO did not make amends for that act, did not make plans on how not to make that same mistake, then that's a reason to fire him. We weren't given either part of that, not even an opportunity to know what the charge is, and not the due process piece for being able to make amends for that. Just simply called in, and a 5-minute meeting, I was dismissed.
Yeah, and 2 weeks after you get a note from a letter saying, good job, good work, keep it up.
But this wasn't the first time I was fired by Guy Platter. I was also fired in August for just a joke, a statement I made in front of the staff. And he said it was, as a leader, it was a reckless statement. It was something as simple as trying to get teachers to work problems out themselves rather than dragging me in as an objective party. And I said something like, if one of the teachers complains to me about another teacher, I'm going to take that to that teacher. So it's best if the two of you came together. If there was no agreement, then I would like to be called in.
And he said this because teachers were tattling on each other. I mean, it's almost been, that was almost nurtured, I would say, that kind of that atmosphere. There was an atmosphere of, tattle on each other, which is ridiculous. It's a horrible place, a
Yeah.
horrible way to work. And so in order to kind of end that, I think what he said was brilliant, pretty much. He told them, you know, really you need to get it settled before you come to me. If you have an issue with someone, take it to that person. Because if you come to me and ask me to get involved, I will take it to that person. Brilliant.
Absolutely.
And so then these people who had been conditioned to run and tattle ran and tattled and ran to Guy and said, oh, well, this is what Bruce Greening said. And Guy called him in, told him it was a very unprofessional thing to say, and you're fired. But, I mean, that's not really why he fired him. He had his own, you know,
Yeah,
personal
his own
reasons, but that's what he was
reasons.
going to use.
Yeah. Well, it gets back to that meeting where they were going to present that budget. I mean, you would have tried to answer the questions that
Yeah.
parents would have had. What does this mean? Well, I don't know. I'll ask Mr. Platter and send you an email, get back with you. Or if you knew, you would answer it. And I think they just didn't want answers. They just wanted it to be run
Absolutely.
through and without any questions.
This kind of fed, this action of these teachers running and tattling kind of fed a kind of a paranoia
Yeah, I can
that
see
exists. That they had information that they did not want out. So anyone that's going to be transparent, that's going to be open with their finances, with their, you know, whatever protocols they have corporately, that you were not a fit. You were too honest.
Yeah.
You were a man or a woman of integrity. You had concern for the children. You wanted to see you want the children to succeed. And this is not the kind of corporate policy they want.
No.
They would put on their brochures that they're, you know, working hard to ensure that every kid succeed. But really, bottom line, it's about the dollar, and nothing more than that. It's about the dollar.
Welcome to the United
Yeah,
States of
absolutely.
America. It's all about the dollar. You know, preparing for this show, I got an email from a teacher here in Fort Wayne who's I'm sure a great teacher and had been a teacher for a long time. And this teacher wrote, I've always felt that the poorest and most scandalous educators are the ones who are elevated to a higher position downtown, as it's called here in Fort Wayne. If a person is a hard-working, conscientious teacher, that is exactly what he or she will always be, a hard-working, conscientious teacher. A reward for doing an excellent job in educating students? Not likely. And that's the mentality of public schools, that reform schools say, charter schools say we need reform. We will take those teachers and elevate them to the status they deserve. And as you've found out, they say one thing and do the other. It's the ruling elite, you know. We need to not pay so much attention to what people say in authority, but what they do. Because usually there's a big gap between the two. And there seems to be some sort of personality of people that can convince us. I call them actors. I say the main quality for a president is to be a good actor. You know, to be able to come out and say one thing and do the exact opposite.
Absolutely.
And without apparently any twinge of conscience or maybe even an awareness of the difference.
But someone has to pay attention to this here in Fort Wayne. Someone has to be so concerned that they will come forward and do something about it, because with the openness of this new presidency, there's an openness to charter movement, to the charter movement. And if the charter movement, under the guise of educating children, and really is about the dollar, gets a foothold, we'll see the demise or the privatization of public education.
You'll see the end of it,
Right.
yeah. I mean, at least public schools are required under compulsory education to teach a kid till he or she is 16, or at least make the attempt. They have to go through some rules, motions to expel a student. So, yeah, they'll herd everybody into a charter school. They'll have no regulations on expelling, you know, and I think, if this is fair to say, I don't know if on Wells Street, but from what I gather, a lot of the students in charter schools are poor, not the children of the elite, the ruling class. These children end up, a lot of them, in the penal system, which is another money-making corporation. This is another private-run business. I think it used to be run by the government. That's been taken over by businesses, and they need customers. And so this is another worry I have about schools. You know, I have a daughter, so it's would be important to me anyway, but certainly when you become a parent, it's even more important to think about schools and schooling, and not just turn it over to schools, and certainly not to corporate America. I'm not a fan of public schools, but I favor them over anything that corporations get their hand on. They have proven money over people, or profits.
And then this connection you're making here, Terry, corporations feed one another. Educational system is feeding into the prison system.
Exactly.
Literally preparing them for jail.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Literally keeping them dummied down to prepare them for another conglomerate, another corporation, money-hungry corporation, to enroll them, those who are failing out of the public school, falling between the cracks, into their institution.
Well, I know when I was growing up, which was a while ago, I never heard of any kid in my classroom, or any kid I played with, or, you know, basketball, or in my range of friends and acquaintances, I never heard of anybody being given drugs like Ritalin for attention deficit. And this is all part of what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
And we could do a whole show on the connection of all of this, but it's important because, as I've said from the beginning, that your case is extremely important. The two of you have to have a job. You have to pay the bills like anybody else. But in the larger scheme of things, it should be important to every single one of us. Every single one of us, to give thought to this and not just turn this over to the greed of corporate America. It's a danger, and I just hope people can wake up. I mean, you know, we've seen it and being lied to, and go to wars where hundreds of thousands of people die, and most of the people fighting that war are the poor Americans who end up in Iraq. So it's almost as if, maybe it's not even almost, it is as if the country needs poor functioning students to fight the wars and, you know, fill up the penal system. And you might think that's cynical, but I imagine there's all kinds of books and statistics that'll back that up.
Well, absolutely. That's why we put them on both legal and illegal drugs. We herd them into special education, where as soon as we see a kid that's too active in the classroom, oh, he needs to be he's hyper, he's ADH, and let's put him on Ritalin, and then let's get a IEP and give him a special education program, and then he's locked for 12 years with this special education tag on him. And the self-esteem, all of that's broken down in the child. Part of the purpose of the education system is to build all of that up.
Build all that up. It's the honorable excuse. You know, they want to put children 8, 9, 10 years old on statin drugs, which I've had heart problems, and I've been on a statin drug, and the statin drug almost killed me. That is ridiculous. But they use the honorable excuse, like we've talked about with schools. Schools aren't meeting the needs of our young people. We care so deeply about them. We need to reform the schools, or we'll come up with charter schools. And you know, we all know that kids being, well, fat is a big problem. So the statin drugs somehow are going to make a dent. Well, not exactly in that, but in high cholesterol and so forth, you know, the symptoms of blood pressure. Anyway, you might think this is all off the topic, but it is not. It is right on the topic, because it should be very scary to each and every one of us that you can go to your place of employment, be doing a good job by every measure of a good job, and 5 minutes later, you've got your briefcase and you're out of there, you're fired. This is just not acceptable, period. And schools, that's not reforming anything. As I said, even I got a hearing.
It borders on insanity. And one step further, if it's not checked, it will continue, because then they'll feel that they have the free reins. It feeds on itself. I think we have about a little under 10 minutes, so I'd like you two to just, anything else you'd like to say, anything we may not have thought of at the school in your defense, because the main thing is this was your forum to tell your story. And I felt perspective is necessary to show why it's so important, not just an isolated incident. As you've said, it's happened at Imagine charter schools all over the country. You had had a letter or an article, a man in Dallas, Mr. Haig, I think, was writing a story about Imagine schools. I forget, what was that about?
He was investigating the relationship of profit, nonprofit, you know, how it works, for-profit at the top, nonprofit at the school level.
Yeah.
That was really what he was investigating. How they made their money at the top. He was interested in the fact that the actual Imagine schools never own any of their own property. They actually lease from the corporation, borrow money from the corporation, pay the corporation back at, what is it, 12.5% something. That was, there are quite a few reporters out there interested in that and how that works. So.
Yeah, not nonprofit, public schools. I mean, for example, high school that my daughter probably will end up going to, you know, they were going to do improvements. They send out a form to everybody in the neighborhood getting your input. So at least there's some attempt to account for the money they're going to spend, which is our money, property tax money. Whereas again, Imagine charter schools do not have that responsibility. They can buy whatever school they want and, I guess, charge what they want. And, so that's a big difference between public schools and charter schools.
Well, if Guy Platter is the spokesman for the corporation, in his words, no one can tell them what to do in terms of their corporation, how to run their business. And that's true. It is a business. It is not a philosophical approach for national reforming of education. It is a business. And as a business, income, expenses, the critical thing here is that federal and local legislation requires that these monies are given to nonprofit organizations. They're not supposed to be making money off of this. No charter school is supposed to be profiting from this. They're supposed to be educating, doing things differently than public schools, and challenging the kids in a different way that public schools are not. That's the focus. But when you look at the finances, it's geared more to the profit as opposed to instructional pieces.
Yeah, I think that's clear. Anything else you want to say, Jennifer?
I think we've pretty much covered what we wanted to talk about.
Well, you're both very eloquent, well-spoken guests with a lot of insights. I feel very sorry as a Fort Wayne resident, American citizen, that you've been treated this way. I take it personally, and I know, you know, what I guess the reason I take things personally is I know the next step is me. I mean, if you just want to put it in a selfish way, if they can do this to you, they can do about anything they want, they being the rulers, to any of us.
That's why I want to thank you personally, Terry, for inviting me on the show to air this out. If for no other reason, it can be a warning for every other employee out there, particularly those that are under the at-will status, that they have to be careful. But if you are a free thinker, creative, and are concerned, particularly in the education of children, that really should matter. Even your job should not be a part of the equation of whether you're going to do your job effectively. Eventually, you'll find a job. Hopefully, we'll find a job soon. But if you're in this business today, you have to have the heart and the spirit for educating children.
I love that. What a great ending, the heart and spirit for educating children. Boy, what a radical idea that is, Bruce. Well, I want to thank my guests, Jennifer Murray and Bruce Greening, both until a month ago, teachers doing a great job at Imagine Charter School, now reduced to being on Theater for Ideas.
Thank you, Terry.
But yeah, my pleasure. And you know, Mark Twain said the purpose of all schools, I don't have the exact quote, but I know he used this word, is to conceal. And he's one of the great Americans. So with that, I just love your ending. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You've been
Thanks,
watching
Terry.
Theater for Ideas. Imagine this: good teachers fired for no reason. And I hope you will take some kind of action. Thanks for watching.